is this? Oh no. It's a Halloween special. Hello and welcome to Cult Movie Cult, where we watch and discuss the horrific, the obscure, and the flat-out strange from the other side of cinema. I'm Mark Dickerson.
And I'm Jeremy Fink, and welcome to the inaugural Cult Movie Cult Halloween special. Slashers, ghouls, camp, gratuitous nudity, and gore. Where would cult movies be without the contributions of the horror genre? Both Mark and I were launched into the world of cult movies through the horror route, so we realized that it was probably time to put out a Halloween special. We hope this episode is more trick than treat, so grab your candy corn, check your apples for razor blades, and hold on to your mortal soul. This is 1988's Night of the Demons.
Filthy bastards! Damn you all to hell! Happy Halloween, asshole! Kids! Stop looking at me!
How about an orgy? Run, Judy, run! See Judy run!
Happy Halloween, dear.
Night of the Demons is a 1987 supernatural horror film directed by Kevin S. Tenney, written and produced by Joe Augustin and starring Amelia Kincaid, Kathy Podwell, Linnea Quigley, Hal Havens, and Alvin Alexis. It follows a group of high school students who throw a party inside an isolated funeral parlor. While attempting a seance, they accidentally release a demon locked inside the crematorium that begins to possess them one by one.
Yeah, Jeremy, I can't believe, first of all, that it's taken us this long to do an actual Halloween special.
I know.
We've done a couple Christmas ones, but never occurred to us to really do a Halloween one. But I'm definitely glad we did, and I'm glad we started with this movie, which you picked, because it is just a lot of fun. And was there a reason in particular that you chose Night of the Demons from 1988?
So I'd like to preface that we're not sponsored by this company, but I subscribed to Shudder this month, which I've had a wonderful time with. And I wish we were sponsored by Shudder. If anyone from Shudder happens to listen to this,
yeah, feel free to reach out. No.
I think we have very similar viewpoints on the value of horror. But alas, in subscribing to them, it popped up that Night of the Demons was available for streaming on their site. And I remember that movie specifically, and you know, as we always say, full spoilers ahead. There was one image where there was this one character in the film, Suzanne.
Suzanne.
Lipstick. Yes, the lipstick. And there's a scene where this character named Suzanne sticks a tube of lipstick into a particular body part, which I remembered watching this years ago, and something about that image just was really bizarre to me. It just totally caught me off guard, because there were some supernatural things in the horror in that movie at that point, but that one just seemed to cross a line that none of the other ones had to that point. And something about it just stuck with me, where there was something that felt very kind of off kilter and surreal about it. And it just occasionally, that image and other images from this movie, I would find myself thinking about them while watching other movies. But this was one that not a lot of people seem to talk about it, so I figured it was time to kind of give it its due and see what we thought.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I'd seen it a while ago, so it was great to revisit it, especially around this time of year. I mean, it's right from that opening, those opening credits and that music. I mean, it just felt like Halloween to me. Which another horror movie recently that I watched was the original Candyman, and that also
same.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
I loved it. I mean, I liked it a lot, and a big part of it was the music, which was done by Philip Glass, which I didn't even realize
Yeah, that's
that
crazy,
either.
right?
And yeah, and that music as well. It just felt like Halloween. It just felt, when you started watching it, just really got me in the mood. So this movie really picked up where that left off, and I really felt that way with this one as well. And so I guess we'll just get right into it here. So the basic premise here is basically a Halloween party. So not very high concept. It's a party, but I guess it's in an abandoned funeral parlor, and it's on Halloween night. And it's a bunch of teens, I guess high school teens, right? I don't know if they allude to it, but I guess we're supposed to assume.
Yeah, I would say high school, because they're still
Yeah.
like living with their parents and stuff. So
Right.
it seems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're out for a night of debauchery, and well, let's take it from the beginning. So again, I would just want to start with those opening credits because again, it just got me instantly in the Halloween mood. And there's like, not only the dark synth horror, which if you've heard any episode of our show, the opening music is very similar to that type of music, which I always feel is appropriate for these kind of like, low budget or cult horror movies. And you hear that music in a lot of these types of movies from this era, particularly from the 80s. But I forgot, I mean, again, I'd forgotten a lot about this movie, but I forgot how good the music was, particularly the theme song here, which, just really stood out to me. And the brother of the director, whose name is Dennis Michael Tenney, did the music for this, as well as a couple other of the director's films. And right off the bat, there's like ghouls and ghosts and cemeteries, ghosts popping out and things like that. So it just has a really cool style to it in the beginning there. And
Yeah.
So yeah, and actually this is just a very good Halloween pick, Jeremy, because from there the film literally starts with the image of a pumpkin, and it's that the teen that he's in a pig mask. And what's his name again? He has an interesting name. Hold on.
His name is Stooge.
Stooge, of course. How could I forget Stooge? Yeah,
Stooge. There are a lot of characters in this movie who fill very specific tropes.
For sure.
It's a super that's what's kind of interesting with this one is it's so kind of such a perfect example of 1980s horror in some ways, because it hits every single trope. There's kind of like the virginal final girl who's maybe not so virginal. They kind of hint at that maybe like she's a little bit more not quite as buttoned up as maybe other final girls from 80s horror movies would be. But then there's kind of the bad girl, there's the kind of cool guy. But they do play with it a little bit. Like by the end, it seems like some of the things we expect of these characters they start to subvert.
Yeah.
But at the same time, leading into it, within the first 10 minutes, it's almost like a checklist. It's like, all right, you get the goofy, over the top, bigger dude who thinks everything is a joke and is kind of mean to everybody. He's
kind of like the bully, or the one in the group of friends that it's like, why do we even hang out with this guy? It's more just kind of like he's just I guess fun to be around because he's such a bad boy or whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
But, he's kind of a jerk, I guess. But that's Stooge, and so again the film opens with him with the image of a pumpkin, with him in the pig mask and yelling, trick or treat, as we're driving around. So I was like, all right, this was a really good pick, Jeremy. I'll give you this one. And then the fact that it takes place entirely on Halloween night, which that's something that I always enjoy in movies, when it takes place in like either one day or one night or one event. I always enjoy those kind of things. So that kind of sets it apart a little bit, from some other, I guess, 80s horror movies. So it's kind of like a novel idea, and besides Halloween, I guess, but but I think even that one's not completely on Halloween, is it? I actually kind of forget if that's
Halloween.
entirely...
No, Halloween. It's weird you're bringing it up, because I literally just watched Halloween last night.
Yeah, the original.
And it is entirely set on Halloween, except maybe...
for the flashback, I guess, in the beginning.
No, that is Halloween. I believe that's
previous
Halloween.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's a previous. So it's set on. I think the entire thing is set on a Halloween, because not to stray too far, but I think that one is, with the exception of maybe the scene when Michael Myers escapes.
Yeah.
the asylum. I think the entire thing, but nevertheless, Night of the Demons.
And nevertheless, yeah. So
time.
it's not done that much, but in these types of movies, so I like that idea of it, and so we start with these teen kids being a bunch of hooligans around around the neighborhood and casually harassing the elderly, and these damn kids, which at first I was like, because as I get older, I feel like I sympathize more with the older people in movies,
Absolutely.
usually. So I was kind of like, oh, this poor guy, he just keeps getting scared by these kids. They're like jumping out at him and everything. But then you start to realize that this guy is not exactly innocent, I would say.
No.
He's pretty rude to the one girl who's actually being nice to him, and then proceeds to put razor blades into the apples that he's gonna hand
Give
out
to
for
children.
Halloween, so
which is an
that,
interesting.
Like, okay.
It's an interesting tone setter because I like watching it. It had been a while since I saw this movie, but I knew that it's not where it went. But I couldn't watching it now. Trying to go at it fresh. I was like, oh, is this gonna have something to do with the plot?
Yeah,
is this guy gonna be like is he like some evil older guy who puts razor blades in apples and unleashes something on these kids? But no,
it's like you don't know if it's. I mean, it's sort of like a one-off joke. I mean, you get the capper at the end, but it's just like a little aside, I guess. It's pretty sinister though. It's pretty dark.
Yeah.
But we'll get to what happens in the end there. So right off the bat, we have that scene. And we have some, of course, as we mentioned in the intro, these movies tend to have some gratuitous nudity, and we get that pretty early on here. Even for this genre, I found myself wincing a little bit. I don't know if it's just because it's 2021 and things are very different now. But this, in particular, seemed very unnecessary a lot in this film. But it was the 80s, so
that's what people were going to the movies to see.
It was almost like they had to put it in the movie.
Yeah,
for
it was how they could compete with other films.
Yeah, it was in the contract. They had to put it in there. So, and then so our main character that you alluded to, Jeremy, and her name is Judy in the movie, played by Kathy Podwell. She's like the good girl, it's kind of what I guess the stereotype that she would fit into. And so she's getting dressed and her like little brother's spying on her or whatever, or in the closet. Bodacious boobies, sis. Yeah. I had to write that line down because that was just that was too 80s not to not to take note of. Somehow I picked out that the actor who played her brother, this is super random and aside, but was, I don't know if this might be a little older than for you, Jeremy, but do you remember a show called Wild and Crazy Kids that was on Nickelodeon in like the 90s?
I don't remember watching that.
I've
heard of it, but I didn't watch it.
Some listener might remember that show, and apparently he was one of the hosts of that show, which was very random because that's such a wholesome, it's on Nickelodeon, so it's just funny to see him in this kind of role. But anyway, so we find out at this point that there's a party at Hull House. That's where all the kids are going. So it was once a funeral parlor right next to the cemetery, of course. And we learned that there was a family murder-suicide that happened on Halloween night. So get some spooky lore there, kind of setting it all up. And of course, Jeremy, along with all the other cliches, there's always a character there's always someone who knows all about the history of like the location, and able to dispel these like little tidbits as they roam around the parlor and everything, which is helpful for the audience. So that's good.
Yeah, I kind of enjoyed it in this one because they were just kind of so blunt about it. There was no kind of like figuring it out. It was like, they sat down and he told the story. This guy, I forget the character's name. He was dressed up as a doctor. I remember that.
It's hard to remember some of it because a lot of the characters kind of blend together.
A lot of them have like names like Billy, Sal. It's very common like just guy names. I don't think it was Billy. I think Billy was.
I don't think it was either. Yeah.
I think Billy was the guy who
might have been.
Judy was trying to, or not was trying. Billy was trying to get with Judy.
It was either Jay or Max. I'm gonna go with one of
Jay.
those.
Yeah, I think. Let's say Jay, just to keep it not confusing.
Yeah, sure.
But he was dressed up as a doctor.
Oh, no, because Jay was Judy's boyfriend. So
Jay was Judy's boyfriend.
So it was probably Max. Yeah, we'll go with
probably Max. Yeah, but he just sits everyone down, and as if he'd written a book about it, just tells the entire history. And they ask him, "How'd you know?" And he essentially says, "I read it." And then they give him a hard time, like, oh, I didn't know that you read books. And he's like, oh, I read loads of books. And then they kind of don't really...
Nerd.
Yeah, which they just all rag on him for. It's
right.
It's,
you went to a library, You
went to a library, it was a whole thing. But we understand the kind of situation they're in very fast.
And he does mention something that does come back into play later, which is the wall, the brick wall, which he's which to me, I would see that and just be like, hey, it's a brick wall. But to him, he explained that it was built over water, I guess, because water keeps out the the evil spirits or whatnot. So it also not only is there a history to Hull House with the murders in the family and everything, there's also, I guess it goes back even further than that to, I guess, the natives that lived there even before the house existed. So we get that little bit, those little tidbits there. And then, as you said, Jeremy, he does kind of sit them all down and they have this like spooky story time where he's telling them the history of the house. And I do want to talk about, so we have our main young couple, Judy and Jay, and they are, again, like the clean-cut couple, or at least at first is what they seem compared to all their friends. Although Jay has some wandering eyes, and so that's kind of where this is like, you said they subvert some things. I thought that was pretty interesting. Instead of just having Jay be like the super clean-cut, all-American guy, I mean, he is that, but also, again, he's kind of, I think he makes out with at least one other girl, and he's leering at some of the other girls, and that Judy's not really aware of, and stuff like that. So he's kind of cheating a little bit on her, or whatever.
Yeah, he's kind of a fun subversion in a weird way. It's fun because you at that point in time, he exactly is the kind of guy who you think audiences would expect to live through this kind of movie, or at least be there till the very end, being the one trying to like save Judy. And then dying as a martyr, and the fact that we kind of get to see him be a dick and have a very
once he started being a dick, I was like, oh, he's gonna die. He's not gonna make it.
Which was kind of cool. It was kind of fun.
Cool, it's different. Like you said, it's there's a lot of the typical stereotypes and archetypes presented here, but there's definitely more nuance than a lot of these films. And maybe that's because they were kind of at the tail end of it. I mean, they filmed it in 87, I guess, came out in 88. So there had already been so many of these films pretty much since the original Halloween. It's kind of what kicked off a lot of, these
an interesting little
films.
thought. An interesting thought is popping into my mind, and this is a weird connection, but timing-wise it checks out. The Breakfast Club came out in 1985. Okay. And I think in a weird way, that movie maybe had an influence on this, because this is a very bizarre assortment of kids to be hanging out together.
It is, but it's also I mean it's all the it hits all the different notes, for sure.
Because I think, I mean, maybe even before we continue with synopsis, we should just go over like who exactly this group is made up of.
Let's talk about the,
because you get Stooge, who we said is kind of the bully, the kind of, and then we get this guy Sal, who's he's kind of like he should be on The Sopranos. And just happens to live in whatever small town suburb this is. You
imagine his dad's maybe in the mafia or
and
has connections somehow.
Which and he has an interesting arc, because he kind of goes the opposite of Jay, where he kind of starts as the jerk, but by the end you're like, Sal's not so bad.
He sticks around a little bit longer than you would think.
Like he has a loud mouth, but
I just like his one line about like how the house is so dirty, and he's like, hey, I live in a clean house or something like that. My house is clean, he's just like very respectable, so I like that. But he was I mean, I guess he's not like I guess his archetype would be kind of like this, maybe not slacker, but kind of just like the punk,
like the kind of punk
rebel kind of kid.
He might, if it was 20 years, 30 years earlier, he might have had like a switchblade comb.
Like a James Dean kind of thing.
James Dean. Then we have
too cool for everything, and
he's a cool guy. Then we already mentioned Judy, who's our good girl. Then we have then we have Roger, who's kind of like the sweetest human being. Roger just kind of comes in and he's like, hey guys, I don't know if this is a great idea. I'm here for it.
I love that he made it to the end. And he was with well, again, spoilers, but we're gonna get there anyway.
Yeah.
That it's just him and Judy at the end, because you normally these types of movies, as you mentioned too, like it's just that final girl, right? So it was interesting that he was there as well. And I did read something, and I don't know if this is actually true or not, but that the writer of the film included like an interracial kiss, and I don't know if that was between Roger and Judy, like at the end or something like that. But obviously was cut before they even started filming, because this was 1988 apparently. But so you can see some subversion going on there as well. And I thought that was interesting, and I don't know how true that is, and it may have been referring to someone else, but
just seeing a person of color surviving to the end of an 80s horror movie that's pretty exciting, because you really don't see that a lot. Then we also had probably two of my favorite characters, just because they were such a bizarre friendship, which is Suzanne, who is kind of like the blonde cheerleader-ish type, who is best friends with Angela, who is the goth. So like that to me was the thing that kind of was so fun about this movie, is like that friendship, because
there's like these different factions of kids
like
here.
This is such a hodgepodge group of kids to put together, but they all seem to pretty much be friends. Which to me felt kind of more realistic, because I think a lot of 80s movies in particular, you get like these cliques where it's like the jocks hang out with the jocks.
It's more like acquaintances than friends almost sometimes. Like when we talked about River's Edge, that film, it kind of reminded me of that as well, because sometimes they'd be hanging out with people that it's like, why are they hanging out? What is good about this person they're hanging out with? But sometimes you just have acquaintances like that, or even friends like that, where you just have them in your group of friends. So in a way, it is sort of more realistic, I guess, that there's so many different types of people. Although they do, it does feel like a checklist almost, where it's like,
for sure.
Although I guess it wasn't really like a jock character.
I feel like Jay kind of was a jock. We just never actually got to see him. Like, he kind of had the look and the feel.
Yeah, I guess he was. Yeah, you're right.
Like, I don't know. I don't feel like he's the theater kid. You know what I
mean? No, not at all. And then we have the nerd, I guess we would call him. The bookish one.
The bookish one.
Which we're going to just call Max, because we're not really sure.
Yeah, we're not really sure. And then Franny. We don't really learn much about Franny.
Franny's that's the goth one? Or is that someone else?
No, Franny's just the other. Franny's the one who hooks up with the doctor. Yeah.
Okay, Angela's the goth one. Yeah.
Angela's the goth. Franny's the one. It's a lot of characters with kind of stock 80s names, so forgive us for.
Yeah.
We got confused. Franny's the one who kind of hooks up with the doctor. She's kind of there, but still, it's just interesting. We just kind of get this hodgepodge group, but we can go back to our story. It feels important to kind of acknowledge who all these characters are, because it's a lot to keep track of.
Right, and I do want to mention that. Suzanne, who you mentioned is friends with the goth girl Angela, and the first shot is of her bending over in a convenience store. But Suzanne, so she's played by Linnea Quigley, who, when I was looking up her history, she's appeared in a lot of cult films in particular, but also horror films, cult horror films. So that was pretty interesting. I didn't realize that she did look familiar to me. But when I looked up her credits on IMDb, I was just really impressed with, she's somewhat of a horror movie veteran, I guess.
Yeah, she certainly qualifies for the Scream Queen title.
For sure, yeah, Scream Queen. She's been in the genre a lot, and even in the original Silent Night, Deadly Night, which we covered on our last holiday special for Christmas. So yeah, she's been around. So and she gets some interesting scenes we're gonna get to in a bit. So back to the movie, what's going on story-wise here. Not much of a story, but just enough to kind of keep you interested in what's going on, right? So, at this point, all the kids are in Hull House, and that's where we spend basically the remainder of the film. And again, it all takes place on Halloween night. And I'll tell you, man, once they break out that strobe light, damn, I was like, now it's a party.
Now it's a party. Yeah,
it's pretty early on, but they, once they break that out and they have the tunes going in the background, so they're pretty much right off the bat, just like dancing, partying, whatever. Although they do have a nice snack table set up, which I found kind of funny. Like that these kids like took the time to like set up this like little snack area and all that. It's nice.
Yeah.
I guess
they came to party. I would just like to say how much I did though love that strobe light scene.
Yeah, that was great.
Aesthetically, kind of there was kind of this one main room that they were in. So I'm in the habit of taking screenshots. I watch a lot of movies on my laptop. I'm in the habit of taking screenshots of frames that I find interesting, and I was just like nonstop taking screenshots of this movie when they were in that kind of main room, because you have this really intense like red lighting, really intense red low-key lighting, but then they just pop it with this strobe light that kind of threw this like
it adds
pop of blue over the whole thing. It's really bizarre. And
yeah, I mean, I was joking, but I mean, in reality, I actually love stuff like that in movies, and even the films I've made, I've done things like that just because it's a cheap, easy way to kind of make it more kinetic and things like that, and it's definitely more creative that way if you start adding different types of lighting. And I agree, Jeremy. I think this film is actually very good looking. It's a good looking film.
Pretty stunning.
And, the way so Dennis S. Tenney is the director, and there's some cool shots in there. I mean, one that I noted that I wanted to mention was it kind of took me off guard because I did not expect it at all. But there's a mirror that gets broken into a bunch of pieces on the floor, and so it's kind of like a top-down shot of just these broken mirror pieces on the floor there, and the teen standing over them. And I think it's like every single character. I'm pretty sure. Almost all of them, at least, and they're all just standing there, and we see like fragmented parts of each one of them reflected in the glass. So that's just like a kind of a cool, I don't know. It almost reminded me of like a, I don't know, maybe not Wes Anderson, but something that where it's just like a very, it's obviously very static shot, but you just see like every single character and their own little part of the shot there. So. And it's a pretty long shot. It's like, they're all having a conversation, but I think it's like an interesting way to kind of break it up, especially with films that take place essentially all in one location. It's a good way to, if you have ideas like that for shots, to kind of throw in there.
How do you think they did that? How do you think they did that shot? I was thinking about that. As I was looking at it, because it seems like really simple when you look at it, but like for where the camera is, that was one of the images I screenshotted, and the camera is on a slight angle, kind of from below, and they're not upside down. So I was almost wondering if to get this shot, they might have glued these fragments to a wall. Or something like that. Like, it's a really bizarre...
It could have been something like that. I really, to be honest, like you said, it's almost deceivingly simple. But when you start to think about it, like, how are they... Because you do see every cast member and obviously no equipment or anything. So, I wonder... I'm sure they had to use some sort of trickery with perspective. I'm sure whether it was gluing it or... Maybe they even shot it in... completely different area, like in a studio type environment or something like that. But I was hoping there was actually some information about that, but I wasn't really able to find anything. But just one of those cool little shots, that really breaks up a film like this, where things can feel a little run-of-the-mill sometimes, a little standard. So, I enjoy stuff like that. And so at this point, so early on in the party, there's a noise from the basement. And so they pretty much stay away from the basement for most of the film. And inside, we do get a view of the basement with, obviously no one else is there. And we just see this large, what I thought was like a furnace or something. It reminded me of Home Alone, the basement in Home Alone, where he's like scared of the furnace down there. But we'll get to what it actually is later, I guess. But we also get our first glimpse of what is some sort of demonic creature, monster kind of thing. And so we do get it it's sort of like a prosthetic. I'm not sure if it was animatronic or what exactly it was, but pretty cool looking. And it eventually switches to like a point of view mode, and sort of like Evil Dead or something like that, where the camera is the creature or the beast or whatever. Although we realize very quickly that we're not really seeing. I guess it is the point of view of the creature, but it's also sort of like a ghostly, more spiritual type of movement that we're seeing, because eventually it kind of floats up through the door or whatever. We don't see anything open. We just see it like kind of pass through doors and things like that. And it inhabits one of the party goers, Suzanne, and it basically takes over her body, which is like the first demonic possession that we see in the film, which is something that continually happens to different people. And it happens just as they're talking about demonic infestation, is what they're mentioning in that part. Yeah. So, and the point of view thing is I think it's cool because I imagine it was done to save money, mostly, probably.
Yeah.
But it is pretty effective.
How much do you think? What do you think the budget was on this movie? I don't know if you were able to find information.
I have an answer. Yeah, let me see. So, I found that it was produced for a modest 1.2 million.
Because that's what's interesting to me is 1.2 million. Obviously, not a lot of money, but for this kind of horror movie.
Yeah.
In 1988, like you got to think now with inflation, that's a couple million. Like I think Moonlight was made for $1 million. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like,
right.
You got to think if let's say just $2 million with inflation in today, you can make you can do a lot with that. So like this was low budget, but it wasn't like low budget. You know what I mean? It wasn't like run and gun.
Yeah. No, for sure. And like I said, I'm not sure if the point of view thing was done to save money or I'm not really sure, but either way it was pretty effective, I thought, and especially with the idea that this creature is like sort of like a spirit that's floating around. It did make sense, I thought. So it works, and it's pretty creepy, honestly. And at this point is where we get the possessions and the craziness that really starts to begin here. So along with that idea we were just talking about, Jeremy, about the budget of the film and everything, I guess this was relatively low budget for the time, and we always talk about on this show about different good low budget solutions to movie making, right? Because we come at it from a filmmaking perspective a lot of the time, and not only was the POV shot I thought a good workaround for that, but I thought the film fit the theme in a lot of ways, particularly the main conceit that these actors are being possessed, or that the kids are being possessed. And sometimes, we get flashes of makeup or prosthetics and things like that, but mostly it's simply just the actors themselves just acting possessed, right? So, again, I thought kind of, it is a little different for these types of movies, and it's also pretty good low budget idea, a low budget solution. So you don't have to continually have creature effects or makeup and all that. So, and we do get some of that. Like I said, there's little flashes. It's actually interesting because it's almost like the the prosthetics and the makeup, like it just kind of emerges out of nowhere. Like there'll be like one shot where the actor won't have anything, and then it'll cut back, and they'll look demonic. So it in a way makes it sort of like more scary because it's almost like you don't expect it. So again, now I don't know if that's related to budget or not, but I just thought that was interesting. And that happens throughout the film where different characters are becoming possessed and basically trying to, I guess, kill the other the other teens. Well,
is it? Are they trying to kill them? I think they're trying to possess them as well.
Or I guess, yeah.
This movie is kind of a. What I will say is this movie is kind of a weird hybrid of the slasher and zombie genre. And possession, like there are a lot of different kind of elements at play here, and it's kind of a hard one to quantify, which is something I think I really like about it, is that even though it's playing off of a lot of tropes, it's kind of combining the tropes in a very bizarre way, and there's something kind of hypnotic and really fun about that.
Yeah, it has a supernatural element to it, which is not always there in these kinds of movies. So. For sure. Yeah, I think it makes it stand out a little bit, if anything. So, and then we have the infamous lipstick scene, which you alluded to with the character of Suzanne. And so, do we want to mention anything about that? So, I mean, it starts with just putting lipstick on with the big bright pink lipstick, and then kind of starts going all over her body and taking clothes off and goes around certain areas. So, but again, it just gratuitous, but it also is a little creepy and unsettling, and it works, I think, in a horror film. And it definitely is memorable.
I feel like what's so unsettling about that scene, at least for me, is that like if you watch enough of these movies, you get that they'll throw nudity into a movie like this just to kind of be there, and there's not a reason, and you kind of don't expect it to add up to anything more than that. So when they just casually throw in something so bizarre and disturbing in that scene, you're kind of not ready for it.
Yeah.
Like I think in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is an 80s slasher. Here's a scene with nudity. And then all of a sudden it just takes that, really bizarre turn. And it's kind of like, oh, Jesus, okay. Like, that, I guess that's where we're going.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you wonder, like, is this something they had planned, or is this something they just came up with in the moment, like while they were shooting it? You kind of wonder about that sort of thing, or at least I do when I watch these kind of things. So but again, memorable. It's something that sticks out visually. You're gonna remember that. And also, I thought another disturbing thing around this point in the movie is when Angela becomes possessed. She's the goth girl, I guess. She sticks her hands into the fireplace. Oh yeah. Another character comes in and she's has her hands casually in the fire. She's like, oh, just warming my hands by the fire. So I thought, that was just creepy things. Not every scene is someone being knifed or murdered. They tried to add these other little creepy elements, which when I was reading about the writer, it kind of made a little bit more sense. But we'll talk about that afterwards. But
well, I feel like some of these moments, in a weird way, felt like kind of Lynchian to me.
A little bit, yeah.
Particularly the strobing and just kind of the absurdity of the image, but how and also just the reliance on image to scare. Like, it's not like the idea that's necessarily scary in this movie. It's kind of more like they confront you with these images that are just really strange and dreamlike. I think I said the word hypnotic before, but that was the word. Like, there's one scene where Angela's just dancing with a strobe light popping on her, and they let it play for a really long time. And the thing is, I kept thinking Lynchian, but it didn't feel like Blue Velvet Lynch or Eraserhead Lynch. It felt like Twin Peaks Lynch, which came out a few years after this, which was kind of interesting to me. Not that I want to guess, but I'm like, oh, is this maybe something that David Lynch saw, before making Twin Peaks, and was, because I don't know, just those images and the kind of campiness of the teenagers, it almost, and I'm not accusing him of stealing or anything, but it almost feels like he watched this movie and was like, oh, I could use that as a jumping off point to make something way darker, and you know what I mean?
I mean. Yeah, I definitely get what you mean. It definitely has that Lynchian quality to a lot of it, which, like you said, I mean, obviously he was around before that, but Twin Peaks hadn't really come out yet. So, I can totally see that comparison for sure.
Because I don't feel like he had the kind of camp in his work prior to that. Not Blue Velvet's, as much. Yeah, not as much. Blue Velvet's a little campy. But, it still kind of has this overall tone of seriousness, I would say. Whereas, when you get to Twin Peaks, it's just, it's serious, but, it's full-on camp. And that style of camp, to me, felt very serious, felt very similar to the tone of this camp, where, the camp is there to kind of hypnotize you until they hit you with something way more bizarre.
Right. Yeah, and I like those little moments. I thought they added a lot to it. And again, it wasn't just, because a lot of these movies are really just down to, all right, let's see how these teens get slaughtered, Yeah. Because you want to see the creative kills and all that. But this movie, had a little something different. And I did like that about it. And real quick, I wanted to mention, I believe he's uncredited, but I did see that. So the voice of each of the possessed teens is obviously very different when they're speaking. And so it was Frank Welker who did the demonic voice for the teens. And if you look him up, I mean, that name, I knew it. And when I looked him up, I was like, that's why. He's done every voice ever. He's been in every animated, I'm actually pretty sure, I couldn't find it right now, but I'm pretty sure he does the voice of the bad guy in Inspector Gadget, that very distinctive, I'll get you, Gadget, that kind of voice. So when you get a chance, just look him up, because he's been in everything. Frank Welker. And he's been in, a lot of current things as well, like the Transformers movies and stuff like that. But he's always done a lot of voiceover work. So it's just interesting. I think he was uncredited on this film, but he was the voice of the possessed teens.
It's too funny.
Just a little tidbit there. That's interesting. But anyway, so to get back to the film, at this point, everyone's getting possessed. Not everyone, but a good amount. And the other half of the teens are just like, get us out of here. You know, they're starting to realize that something is going on. We talked about it earlier about how Jay, Judy's, all-American, clean-cut boyfriend, starts to have wandering eyes and starts to... I forget who exactly he's with. He tries to, make out with someone or do something with someone and then he ends up getting killed. And so that's, again, that subversion that we talked about, where you would not expect that in the beginning for sure.
No.
And then we have our friend Sal, who we like a lot, but he ends up dying too. And but I thought there was a good gag with his character. That we see like the tombstone.
Yeah, I wrote that down.
And of course, his last name is Romero, which I thought was a good little reference there. Sal Romero, it just says died tonight. It's like a fresh gravestone. They just like, I guess the demons put it together. I don't know.
Yeah, born 1970, died tonight.
Yeah, so it's like, and they have gags like that in the movie too, which are just like, there's no way they're taking themselves seriously with that. But I'm fine with that in this kind of movie. So I enjoyed that. And then, so eventually we, just to kind of get towards the end of the film, because we could talk about every scene, Jeremy, but in this kind of movie, it's more about, I feel like you just have to experience it. You just have to watch it. It's about the vibe, like you said, and the different characters and the creative, there are some killings that happen. But eventually we get back to the basement where we saw that demonic creature from earlier and when the possession started to happen. And so I believe it's Judy who's pretty much the only one left at this point besides Roger. So Judy and Roger go down the basement to check it out because they haven't been down there yet and they kind of can't go anywhere else at the moment. And we see that what I thought was a furnace that Judy goes to start opening, and this is when we discover that it's not a furnace, it's actually an oven. And she's tells Roger that this is a crematorium, which makes sense, I guess. And so I guess the demons, so the logic here is the demons won't go to hell because it's Halloween, right? That's the
I believe
conceit
so.
here. Okay, yeah, sure. They won't go to hell because it's Halloween. So it's like a special night of evil, I guess, is what they're talking about. Like it's one night of the year where, what did she say? Like all things unclear are free to roam among us or something like that. I noted something about that. I was like, all right, makes sense. We'll go along with that. So that's kind of why all this is happening, I guess. And now Judy, she's a crafty one. Now this was like one of my favorite things in the movie. she makes a makeshift flamethrower. Out of a pipe from the oven and a lighter.
Yeah,
and,
which I did appreciate because they foreshadowed the light, or not foreshadowed. They set the lighter bit up really well because there's kind of a moment early on where she picks up a lighter and someone's like making a joke to scare her. That. They're like, "Ooh, you gonna take the lighter, Judy? You gonna take the lighter? Don't be scared." And she's like, "I'll take it," and she takes it.
She's a good girl, right? Yeah, okay.
She's a good girl. and then it comes back later on and she uses it. Which my question, was who is paying the gas bill? But
well, maybe the demons are.
Maybe the demons, if they can make a gravestone, someone's paying the gas bill. But it is a great moment because
it's a great moment. It's just as the demons are busting through the door of the basement, she just lets loose with his flamethrower, lights them up. I was like, all right, that's actually pretty badass. And actually, it reminded me. Have you seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Yeah, the ending of that movie.
Yeah.
Which isn't. Well, I guess it's a little spoilery, but you should just go watch that movie anyway.
There's something with flame.
There's something at the end with a flamethrower that is amazing, and it just reminded me of that. It just kind of like it comes out of nowhere, but still sort of alluded to before that. Still built up to a little bit, but when it happens, it's just really cool. Here's another thing. So another subversion, which I thought was interesting. So at this point in the movie, Judy and Roger are trying to run back to the front door of the house. They're trying to get out. And Judy is finally confronted by the demonic Jay, now her former boyfriend, I guess. And then, she's locked inside with him approaching her. And I thought that was kind of like a cool, just like a cool idea that, now he's the possessed Jay who's essentially dead and kind of coming back for her now. So, sort of like a zombie, like you said, Jeremy. It's kind of like that zombie idea now.
But kind of interesting if you think about it. This idea, if we're gonna do an analysis of this film, an emotional and psychological analysis, the idea that possessed Jay isn't really that much different than normal Jay. You know what I mean? He's
well,
still just kind of...
Yeah.
He's still just kind of coming at her, like, trying to get her. And she's like, right. No, I'm not going to let you do that, Jay. Take it easy. And,
I was going to say he was a little more forthcoming, but I guess, you're right. No, it's pretty much the same.
He's pretty much the same guy, which, looks
a little different, but...
I don't know if that's the intention of the filmmakers or not, maybe. But ultimately, if that's, if Judy is our main character whose eyes we're seeing the film through, and her big conflict, other than, all of her friends being possessed, is kind of this guy who she's kind of dating, but he's pressuring her. The idea that she has to ultimately face him and get away from him is actually a pretty poetic piece of writing.
It is. I thought it was interesting for sure. It was a pretty powerful way to end it. So I will say at this point, I was wondering, why don't they just try to bust through like the door or try to, jump through a window, which I don't remember if they had tried that before. Maybe there was some sort of, I don't know, demonic barrier, or maybe the demons barricaded it or something. But at this point, Roger does actually take a leap through one of the windows. And I was like, oh, okay, there you go. And he actually ends up bringing Judy with him. It's kind of funny when he jumps through the window because he's like, it's almost like he's amazed that he's still alive in the movie. He kind of like looks down at himself. He's like, hey, that worked. And then he's like, all right, let's get out of here. So he's, him and Judy start to make the run for it. They're finally outside of the house and they must get past the wall that was described to us earlier by the one character who knew everything, because there's this apparently underground stream underneath the wall, which is where the demons cannot pass this stream. They cannot go over it. So only then will they be truly safe if they get over this wall. And because I guess the water keeps away the evil spirits. So they start to scale this large brick wall, which I thought was kind of like a cool like ending set piece here. Because there's a lot of suspense, especially at this point. You don't really know who's going to make it out of this or what's going to happen. So they're climbing up, and Judy attempts to climb because Roger's at the top, and she's not tall enough. She's jumping, trying to get to him. So it's all very suspenseful and pretty well done. Tries to grab his hand as her possessed former friends are all clamoring, trying to come and get her. And there's that one line. It's like, Judy, Roger, where are you going? The party's just begun. And
as she's burnt.
The burnt.
Burnt to a crisp.
So pretty good scene there. And then they are eventually able to escape because the night turns to dawn, and it's kind of like a vampire effect, I guess.
Yeah, so there you go. Every possible monster, ghoul, or horror trope is somehow in this movie. But it is
that's why
weirdly,
it's so good, though.
Yeah, like it's weirdly seamless. Once you get obvious, I think one of the things on this show is that we're not coming in. A lot of people will watch kind of goofy older movies to make fun of them, but I feel like Mark, you and I both try to watch movies in earnest as much as possible, and really try to kind of pick them apart. And I think one thing that is really cool about this is that, like, despite being a mixture of so many different elements, they do work. Like, never once was I like, oh, I don't get why this particular element is coming in. Like, maybe they were a little vague in setting something up, but, like, it never felt, like, out of place tonally. Like, it's like, oh, now they're demons. Now they're kind of zombies. Now it's a slasher. Like, they all just kind of work together in a pretty seamless way.
Yeah. You just go with it.
Yeah, it just kind of it kind of fits.
It's like because also they do set the rules pretty early on, but they leave a lot up for interpretation. I would say they leave a lot to the imagination, especially involving these actual demons that are or these creatures or whatever they are kind of coming for them. I mean, it's like, yeah, sure, okay. So daylight comes and they start to back away, and I guess you see that final image of that demonic creature that we saw in the basement earlier. And I guess they're kind of just out of luck, these demons, maybe next year, maybe next Halloween. So this is essentially the end of the film here, where Judy and Roger, it's daylight. They're walking home down the sidewalk, back in their neighborhood now. And we kind of get that feeling that they're a little tired at this point. It was an exhausting night. And it's just like a nice moment where they're both just kind of walking, not really saying anything. It's daylight out now.
All their friends are dead.
All their friends are dead, so a lot to think about.
It's a rough night.
Yeah, it was a rough night, and they're heading home, but we still get this little capper scene, which I thought was really interesting, which we, because we had that scene in the very beginning with the elderly man, who at first you kind of feel bad for, then you see him putting the razor blades in the apples, and you're like, never mind.
Yeah.
I guess he's kind of a jerk and kind of psychotic. So again, we didn't know if that was just a joke in the beginning or whatever, but it does go back to it at the end, where the old man's watching these two damn kids, walking by and just kind of shaking his head at them or whatever. And then he goes back inside his house, and his wife is making him a nice apple pie in the morning for breakfast with the leftover apples, which of course he doesn't realize at first. He goes, he sits down, he just thinks it's regular old breakfast pie that his wife's making him.
Breakfast pie.
Pie in the morning is just,
yeah.
I mean, I guess people do that.
That should have been the first thing he was suspicious about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, she's like, I was up all night making it. It's just, and it's like this almost like, I wasn't sure at first what they were getting at, but then when you realize that it's the apples that she put in there, it's, I mean, pretty graphic, pretty gruesome. The razor blades just literally slicing up his throat and just blood just pouring out of his neck. But he gets his comeuppance, right? So it's sort of like a happy ending.
In a weird way.
Now, the wife's reaction here is really interesting because she just like, after this happens and he's just bent over, bleeding out on the table, she just like gives him a kiss and she's like, "Happy Halloween, dear." So is it like she's like senile, or is she meant to do it? Like
I kind of thought she meant to do it.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it seemed like she was like.
Yeah, and that, which is almost like a Lynchian thing. It's just like
very bizarre,
it's a super, and like almost
like it's
surreal.
a crazy image. Yeah. Like that's the thing I just can't get over with this movie, and I think why I just love it so much. It's like like plotting the plot and everything is kind of whatever. It's cool, but it's it's a pretty run of the mill. It's basically a slasher film. There's some force killing off teenagers, but just the images in this movie are just dazzling. They're just so bizarre.
Yeah, I mean that's a very unique image of someone's neck just being like sliced open from the inside.
Because you see so many people, particularly in 80s horror films, where there was this kind of competition to like who can get the most gruesome kill. Like especially in the slasher genre. Yeah. And like this movie is just so different than the others in the way it goes about it, because like there's gore and everything, but it's not about that. It's almost like how can we get the weirdest kill? Like how not how gruesome can we make it, but just like how bizarre can we make it?
How can we make it? Yeah, how can we make it stand out? It's like because they still, I would say like they won up a lot. I would say it's probably one of the better slashers, but you're right. I think it but it goes different places with it. It's not just like a crazed murderer trying to kill everyone. It's like all these different elements to it, which we talked about. And I did wonder, like I was like almost wondering if they added this scene at the end because they needed more blood, or was it one of those like studio notes, like, hey, we need a little more gore here, or was it something that they always planned? Yeah.
I'd be curious to watch the trailer, which I don't know if you've gotten a chance to check out the trailer as soon as we're done with this. I'm gonna go back, but I'm wondering if maybe it was something for the trailer.
Maybe.
I'm wondering.
Is it too bloody to show in the trailer? I wonder.
But maybe not the full on gore, but maybe just this image of a woman like kissing her husband and going "Happy Halloween, dear."
Yeah.
Maybe they just needed some trailer fodder. Maybe I don't know. Maybe they just felt that the story was unresolved.
Well, again, it's whatever it was, it stays with you. I mean, it's definitely and her reaction, the wife's reaction, is just very sinister and like very creepy, and I thought it was interesting. But there is a documentary about this movie which I have not seen. I think it came out in 2014. So really? maybe they answer that question there. I'm not sure. Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I do wonder, like, again, it's like, is this something that was added on later? But either way, I mean, I think it works just as like a Halloween movie, which again, Jeremy, kudos to you. This was a perfect pick.
This
for
is Halloween as it gets.
It's a great one for our first Halloween special for sure. Because it also, the elements of it that we mentioned, what it really comes down to is this is essentially like a haunted house movie is what I saw it as.
It's so many different kinds of movies.
And it's so many different, like, again, it's also a slasher, and it's also possession and and supernatural, but it's also, what it comes down to is like, just reminded me of like the most basic horror plot that there always that there's always been, which even like in the silent era, just this idea of like a haunted house, and obviously there's been like millions of movies made about that, but at its core is that's pretty much what it is. But that gives them the filmmakers like a free reign to do whatever they want, essentially, because they have that conceit there. So yeah, really great idea for a movie that I couldn't believe hadn't been done before, essentially, at this point.
Yeah.
But there you have it. There's some other behind the scenes stuff that I was gonna just mention, but nothing major. Just the house itself, because I was interested in the location they shot in. Apparently, according to, I guess it was the actress Linnea Quigley, she said that the house they used in the film had very little dressing done to it. It was pretty much in the shape that you see it in the film, which is pretty bad shape.
Yeah.
Many of the items, furniture, and decor was authentic to the original building, which I thought was interesting. So they didn't even have to change that much, apparently. I'm sure they added little things, but as far as the actual like rooms of the house go, they didn't have to do too much. So I mean, that was a gold mine of a location there. And again, it's also one of those movies where it's like, okay, did they make the movie because they had this location? Like, did they know of this location and they just wanted to use it? Or, because that time period, I feel like things like that would happen, where maybe not now that wouldn't happen, but at that time it's like, you don't want to just go off on a whim, like, hey, there's this creepy abandoned house that we can shoot in, let's make a movie out of it.
There's a little more money being thrown around at low budget horror movies because low budget horror movies would actually go make money.
Yeah. And this,
not that they don't
well.
now. I mean, they still do.
Yeah.
Especially with streaming now, like low budget horror movies, that they still make money and some of them take off. But I feel like then there was this kind of thing where if you could make something that you could cut together a good trailer for and have a really great VHS cover for, like you could probably have like a good trailer, a good VHS cover, and then a couple shocking scenes in the film that high school kids would talk about to their friends. Like you might have a hit on your hands.
Yeah,
So
I think
it's
they
like-
were pretty confident that a certain demographic, would go, a certain percentage of the population would go see these types of films.
Yeah.
So I think they were more willing to try things in that regard, and to be, as long as they got their kills in and their gore and their gratuitous nudity. I mean, I don't think they cared that much what the actual plot of the film was. So there was a little more leeway in that regard. And I think, Jeremy, like you said, with streaming now, I think you do see that a little bit as well. There's a little more experimentation going on in that regard. Although, I mean, I don't know what the new like horror movie is that everyone's talking about. I guess Squid Game, which isn't really horror, but it's a TV series. But so you don't see too many like just kind of taking chances like this, and I think it worked in this regard. I think it's just very simple plot, but it works, and shot in 4 weeks apparently is another note that I made.
Pretty quick shoot.
Very quick, yeah. Which I guess if it's mostly on one location, that kind of makes sense. And as I mentioned, produced for 1.2 million is what I saw, and it did very well. It was a limited release, at least I believe in the beginning. I think it was only in Detroit, and then eventually went to New York and things like that. And said it earned 3.109 million. So I mean, it made money,
which is solid, especially considering that most of their money for a movie like this probably came from VHS sales and not box office.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that was only theatrical at that point. So and it stayed in theaters for the rest of the year, like through the Halloween time and all that. So it definitely did well, and I think it hit all the right marks, and it's a very, very successful horror film, but also great for this time of year, and I think like I said, for a holiday special, I think it makes a lot of sense to talk about it. And one other thing I wanted to mention: there are 2 sequels, which I have not seen. Have you seen the sequels?
I have not. Two sequels and a remake. I believe.
A remake in 2009. They remade it, I guess, which I was not aware of either. Yeah, so I haven't seen any of those, but
I might try to dig into them. They're not by the same people, I believe.
Well, I think there's some involvement with maybe the writer or
it's like kind of a mix, but it wasn't like the same
Right.
team. I think the second one was written by the same writer, but different director, and I believe the third one was written by the director of the first one, but directed by a different person.
Oh, okay. So there was weird minor involvement. I guess
elements are there, but it's not the same squad.
And from reading the descriptions, I was like, okay, that's essentially like more of the same. But I mean, I would check them out. I'd be curious to check those out. The remake, I don't know. I I checked out the trailer for the remake, and I was kind of like, I don't know.
Very like 2000s horror.
Yeah, it felt like the 2000s. So I mean, which makes sense. It was just very like loud and like music. I think they took the party aspect, and it's like a lot more of a party atmosphere, like a lot more actual like teenagers there and everything like that. So, but who knows? Maybe it's decent.
Although there was like metal music in this one, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, it was kind of like punk music, and it was interesting.
Punk metal, which I'm always I always think that's interesting because I feel like in a horror film to use music like that is definitely bold because it can be way too on the nose. Yeah, like it's like, oh, it's a dark movie, let's use dark music.
Right, but it was deliberate. But it seemed like and also like it was like, okay, teens would at that time would probably listen to that kind of music.
They would be listening to metal music,
especially at a Halloween party and an abandoned funeral parlor.
It was kind of fun.
Yeah, it was cool. No, I liked the music and the I liked the score, and I liked like the song choices as well. And one other quick thing I wanted to mention was about the writer of the film, at least the first film that I know of. Oh no, he says it's his story for Night of the Demons 2, so maybe but so Joe Augustin, so there wasn't too much I could find about him because I was very curious to see. It doesn't seem like he wrote much else besides this film, but I guess he's also like an author and writes about paranormal. I don't know if you'd say factual or, from that kind of perspective where it's not like a fiction story. And Dan Aykroyd, who is a very big paranormal enthusiast, so it's not just Ghostbusters. He in real life he's like really into the UFOs and aliens and ghosts and paranormal activities and stuff like that. And apparently he wrote like the preface to one of his books to the writer's, I guess one of the books he released called Ghostwriter. So I just found that interesting that he was, I guess the writer of the film was actually into the paranormal type of things, and I think it comes across in certain ways.
He thought he was creating a documentary, probably.
That's kind of if you ever hear Dan Aykroyd talk about ghosts and things like that, I mean, they're passionate about it, So I think that comes across a little bit because you can tell that there more thought was put into the lore, I guess, than in some of these films, I would say. It kind of comes across. So, yeah, I mean, all around, just really solid, fun, teen slasher / whatever, possession, haunted house movie, whatever you want to call it. It's just everything, So, anything you could want at this time of year. So
exactly. Do you have any final notes? I know I have one or two little things, but Mark, any final thoughts?
If you haven't seen it, well, we just ruined it all for you, but...
Yeah. But
either way,
we haven't really ruined it because what we've said can in no way.
Yeah, we cannot do it justice. Yeah.
This is one of those kind of unspoilable movies.
True, definitely.
I think. I mean, there are definitely things you can spoil, but I think if someone could explain the entire plot to you, and it would still be a riot to watch because.
I mean, we left out a lot of details, but we just hit the main beats. But yeah, if you haven't seen it, please do. If you enjoy these kinds of movies, which if you're listening to this, you probably do. I'm going to assume. So, yeah, Jeremy, anything else you wanted to
so just two final notes. And one, the first thing that kept popping into my mind during this movie is the word spooky, which I know is something gets thrown around a lot, but just in terms of the Halloween horror movie of your, like, this idea of what does something being spooky versus scary mean? And I think that this movie is spooky more than scary, and I think a lot of horror movies that you get today and even then kind of go for this like very dark, heavy, evil thing. Yeah. But I think that there's a certain kind of tonality to movies, and you see a lot of them coming out, particularly in the late 80s and like early 90s. Another thing that kind of falls into, for me, the realm of spooky is like the Goosebumps series. And it's this idea where it's about being scary, but it's about being fun. It's like it's fun to be scared.
Yeah, it's about being scared, right? Exactly.
It's about being scared, but in a way that's fun, and it's like you're kind of living on the edge and pushing yourself. It's not like, oh, you should go home and not be able to sleep after necessarily. It's kind of like, this should be a fun experience that you can have with other people, and it's quirky and weird, and so I don't know. I kind of miss spooky movies in a weird way.
I agree.
Like watching this.
Yeah, instead of like everything being super intense, it's more like just that fun feeling of like things that go bump in the night, that kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Of when
like they still
when
make
you were
them.
A kid and
They still do make movies like that. Like I know the Fear Street movies that just came out Netflix not long ago.
I've heard those are kind of in that vein a little bit.
They're kind of in that vein. I know Elvira is making a big comeback. But you know, just I don't know. There's at least for me personally, when I think of my childhood memories of Halloween, that kind of fun, spooky vibe is what really gets me. So this movie kind of touched home. And then the other last thing I'd like to mention, just briefly, because we'd be remiss if we did not talk about the poster of an 80s slasher movie, because those were obviously very important. So the poster of this one's a lot of fun. It's the image of Angela in her full demon form.
I'm looking at it right now.
And she's holding a party invitation that says, "You're invited to my party, Angela," written in what might be blood. And then the tagline, which the tagline is just as important, is, "Angela is having a party. Jason and Freddy are too scared to come, but you'll have a hell of a time." And the Y in "you'll" is capitalized for some reason, which is just I love it. It's just the kind of thing that could only happen in an 80s VHS kind of movie, and it's so wonderful.
It looks like something out of The Exorcist. Like it's just it's insane looking.
It's just fantastic. Like if all great. You got was that poster, it'd still be a good time.
And it also has that kind of cheeky humor, fun aspect to it, which we were talking about, where it's like it's still scary, but yeah, like you said, Jeremy, I get exactly what you mean. It's more spooky than scary.
More spooky than scary.
It's a spooky movie, with some violence and things like that. But ultimately, I get exactly what you mean. It's a rare breed of horror film. But I do want to check out. There's, I was looking at the director, and I haven't really seen any of his other films, but he had a couple. I think they have some pretty good cult indie cred. I would say Witchboard is one of them.
Witchboard,
and I think and then Witchboard 2, Witch Trap. I like movies about witches. I like things about witches, so I might check those out. I think it's like a Ouija board kind of an idea for those. He also did Pinocchio's Revenge, which I've never seen, but I was always like, what is that?
Actually, Witchboard, it looks like, features Tawny Kitaen, who is known for being in the 80s hair metal music videos for Whitesnake, Still of the Night, and Here I Go Again. Okay, cool. So that's kind of a fun, if you're into that kind of 80s metal culture, that's a fun little piece of obscura. Yeah, I had that one also. I don't know why I'm plugging Shudder, but that one is also in 2021, October 2021. They're offering a great service, because anything that's going to get people watching more horror movies, I'm down for.
Yeah, I think the interests of people that listen to this show and that would watch those kind of movies, I think it makes sense. They would definitely converge. I don't know. I'll be checking out Witchboard maybe even tonight, and I'll check that out too. Yeah, for sure.
Maybe that'll be next year's Halloween movie. We'll see.
That came out. It came out a couple years before Night of the Demons, 1986. So for sure. Lots of fun. And anything else you want to add to this one?
No, that's. I think
pretty much
sums it up.
The poster is great, though. I just keep looking at it.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Great poster. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us on this holiday special here, this Halloween special. I know it's been a while since we recorded. We're going to try to at least do a Christmas special, right, Jeremy? Try to do one more.
Maybe we'll see.
We've been kicking around ideas. We're a lot going on, but just some ideas we're pretty excited about. So either way, we just wanted to at least do this one because this was just a lot of fun to watch and talk about for sure.
Stay tuned and happy Halloween.
Oh, yeah. Happy Halloween, everyone. Forgot to mention that. Happy Halloween, everyone. Thanks for listening to Cult Movie Cult. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. If you have any cult films you'd like to hear us discuss on the show, or if you'd like to officially join the cult, be a guest on the show, you can feel free to reach out to us at cultmoviecult@gmail.com. This has been Cult Movie Cult, and until next time, so long from the other side.